So, this weekend we got episode 1000 of the anime, which brought with it a new version, or the updated version, of the We Are opening. Pretty sure somebody on YouTube has already uploaded a comparison between the original and what we got this week, and something that became painfully noticeable immediately was that the crew has gotten so big that in order to make them fit with the beat of the music, they had to put them in so fast that if you blink, you might miss them. Also, I didn't understand why this sequence started with Usopp until I read a comment from a guy called I Am That Guy 54 on Reddit that said that the order is explained based on their power ranking within the crew. So we start off with Usopp and we work our way up to Luffy for a weakest to strongest sort of order there. Now, I don't know if that's true or not, but if it is, then the animators are pretty clearly telling us that Monster Chopper is stronger than Brook. Turns out the animators were the real power scalers all this time. Now, regardless of whether you think that Usopp is the weakest Straw Hat or not, you have to admit that he does have one of the best moments in this episode, because he's the only one who breaks the fourth wall to celebrate the episode. Shout out to post-time skip Ashura for looking beastly. Also, I really liked how they replaced Luffy punching the Lord of the Coast with him punching Kaido instead. The punching of giant fish monsters continues. I really liked the rooftop sequence. The animation there looked incredible. I think the animators decided to go ahead and spoil the cat and dog Sulong forms, because in the manga, the designs are revealed in a chapter that comes a little bit later than what this anime episode is adapting. Queen looked huge in this episode, really menacing, so I liked that. And then we get a bunch of flashbacks for each of the Straw Hats as they assemble, which I understand why they did it, because they want to celebrate the occasion, but as somebody who thinks about these characters almost pretty much every waking hour of the day, it got to be a little bit too much to be bombarded with flashbacks like this. And the thing that happened to me is that before I watched the episode, I ended up watching this video from Crunchyroll, which was really good, and it takes you down memory lane as well. So when I finished that video, like, that one hit me. Like, I really felt the nostalgia in that. Was like, oh my gosh, like 1,000 episodes. I didn't realize how much that was. But so what happened is that after I watched that video, I pretty much ended up feeling everything that I needed to feel. Like, I felt nostalgic. You know, it was like, wow, what a great journey. And so because of that experience, because I had already gone through memory lane, as I was watching the episode, it felt like I was overdosing on flashbacks. However, if you enjoyed the flashback sequences in this episode, good for you. I won't take that away from you. I did enjoy how the episode ended. It reminded me of Fishman Island and how they assembled in the plaza. Like I said, the rooftop stuff was amazing. Just take a look at this shot of Kaido. And then I also enjoyed the foreshadowing of the conclusion of Robin's fight, with her taking down a Batgirl that looks like a demon. And then obviously we also have a bit of movie news that I'll talk about by the end of the video, because I'm going to tie it into what happens at the end of the chapter. The cover this week shows Yamato, along with some black cats, making a delivery to an old lady that lives on a hill, and apparently this is a reference to a very popular Japanese delivery service called Yamato Transport. Actually, now that I think about it, the logo of the cat, the company logo that I just showed you, looks a lot like the logo or the image on Yamato's shirt. I definitely don't think that it's a coincidence that the chapter opens up with Marco and ends with Hiyori. I think that's super intentional, because if you remember, these two are the characters that are more likely to fulfill the role of the pheasant in the Momotaro theory. So who's going to be the pheasant character? Is it going to be Marco or Hiyori? I would personally want it to be both. But that aside, I do think that the title of this chapter is a reference to Hiyori, because she was the one who inherited Enma, she was the one who passed it down to Zoro, and it looks like she's going to be the one to play a role in taking down Orochi. So figuratively speaking, she could be fulfilling the role of Odin's weapon, Odin's sword. And when it comes to Marco, I do think that this chapter serves to elevate him further, because we find out how tough and strange King is, right? So what does that say about Marco? That he was able to hold off King and Queen at the same time. One of the first translations I read kind of made it seem as if Marco was actually hurt while carrying Izo. Turns out that's not the case, because in the official translation, Marco says to Izo, "What's going on, Izo? Why am I carrying a wounded man around?" So Marco is looking fresh right now, and I think it's pretty obvious, given Izo's comments, where they're going. Everything seems to be pointing towards Marco and Izo going to where Kiku and Kinemon's other half is. Not really sure what's going on with Big Mom in that first page there. I mean, we know she's fighting Law and Kid, but she just seems like she's been maniacally frozen in time or something. We go to Apoo, Drake, and Yamato, and we find that not only do Yamato and Fuga have a pre-established friendship, but also that Fuga seems to be a centaur creature. And so my first thought when I saw this was, I wonder if Fuga also knows law. Because the centaur thing just reminds me so much of Brownbeard and how he looked. So if you remember, Brownbeard got defeated by Hawkins and lost his legs. and then he made his way to Punk Hazard, and that's where he met Law, and Law gave him a brand new set of alligator legs. But then there were also other people in Punk Hazard who had lost the use of their legs because of the poisonous gas that Caesar unleashed on the island. And so we know from Big Mom that the numbers are failed recreations of the ancient giants. They're failed experiments that Kaido got from Punk Hazard. So I'm wondering if Fuga lost the use of his legs because of the poisonous gas, and then Law helped him out as well by giving him the lower body of a horse. Now, another reason for why I think this could be important is because I think Oda knows that a lot of people didn't like the explanation that he gave for as to why Kinemon survived being stabbed by Kaido. And so I think Oda's going to use this as an opportunity to sort of expand on Law's ability, because I'm pretty sure that he knows that a lot of people didn't like the Kinemon thing. So yeah, I think he's going to use this as an opportunity for further exposition. Anyway, we get the Kazembo yokai demon phasing through the floors, heading downward, and Yamato says that if it hits the basement, it's going to cause an explosion in midair, which we knew, right? That was the intention all along. That's what Orochi told Kanjiro to do. Robin and Brook jump onto Fuga's hair that cushions their fall, and I don't know if it's just because my mind is in the gutter, but the way that Robin lands kind of seems like a provocative pose. Like, she seems like she landed sort of bending over. Maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm just having trouble understanding that scene. However, I do think that it's very interesting that Oda has made a very obvious effort to not allow the Straw Hats, with the exception of Frankie and Luffy, to run into Yamato. Like, if you look at the sequence, they barely miss each other, right? Like, Brook is seen going in the opposite direction as Yamato. And so it just kind of makes me feel like, oh wow, what a coincidence that they just didn't run into each other here. And it also happened with Sanji, where Sanji was in the live floor, and then moments before Yamato arrived, Oda decided to take Sanji away from there. And so I'm wondering what Oda has planned. Like, I'm wondering what he's trying to set up by having Yamato avoid meeting some of the other Straw Hats. So Robin and Brook escape CP0 thanks to the fire, and then Apoo shows up pulling a paparazzi. And there's two interesting things about what he says. The first is that he's going to sell the pics to Morgans, and so we know that Apoo, his role, his position under Kaido is that he's an informant. So that makes sense, that fits. But then also, Morgans at one point said, "Sometimes I spin lies and make people dance. I'm a DJ of words." And since Apoo is literally a DJ, I was wondering if this could be foreshadowing to Apoo working under Morgans in the future. And then the other part of Apoo's dialogue goes back to when King and Queen were introduced. Because I remember that King was complaining to Jack, like, the offerings from Kuri are very low, and you know that since we lost Doflamingo, you know who our next business partner is. And so obviously he was referring to CP0 at that point in time. And so Apoo's dialogue seems to add more clarity to that statement from King. Now, one of the questions I have is how come the fire didn't affect these CP0 agents? And during the last chapter review, I mentioned how it was pretty obvious that this guy here has a double fruit ability because he was making a mink float in the air. So maybe he used his ability to protect from the flames. Anyway, Apoo gets hit by a Shigan, but he brushes it off pretty fast because, as he tells Drake, Apoo has armament hockey. And so we already knew this. For those of you who keep up with the Vivre cards pretty much confirmed that Apoo can use both armament and observation hockey. Also, if a Shizunzon from Zoro didn't keep Apoo down, there's no way a Shigan would have done the job either. I really liked the banter between Drake and Apoo in this chapter. It just kind of gave me these Zoro and Sanji vibes. Because they say they hate each other, but then you also have Apoo blasting the ZB0 guy in the face and stopping him from attacking Drake. And then by the end of it, they seem to be teaming up. I like how Apoo is known as the Roar of the Sea, and you have Drake right next to him, sending out a pretty loud roar. So it just reminded me a lot of that panel where Zoro and Sanji decide to attack King and Queen simultaneously. Now, there is a moment where the CP0 guy says to Drake, "You don't think we know who you are, Drake?" And so I'm wondering, does CP0 know that Drake is just a Marine, or do they know that he's actually a member of SWORD? Because SWORD is a secret organization even within the Marines. So I'm wondering if the world government knows about SWORD's existence. We then go outside and we see that Momo is still trying to overcome Kaido's dragon clouds with his own. Then we go to Zoro vs. King and we see King use his Lunarian body, or his Lunarian ability, to retract his face like rubber, showcase the most epic cringe face in the history of this manga, at least from what I can remember, and just catapult his face down to Zoro in a very similar fashion to Luffy's Gum Gum Bell. And then afterwards, King makes a comment about how this is how pteranodons used to hunt. And so this is the third time that Oda has decided to use this gag with his prehistoric devil fruit users. First was with Sasaki turning into a helicopter, and he said, "This is what Triceratops do." And then Queen shot himself out of his body. So again, it's Oda having fun with dinosaurs, putting his humor into the story. What's even funnier though is that Zoro believes what King says. Like when King tells him, "This is how pteranodons hunted their prey," Zoro's like, "Oh really? I had no idea. Okay." Zoro then uses his 360 Phoenix Pound shot and is actually unable to hit King with it, and this pretty much confirms something that I've been saying numerous times before, which is that Zoro does have a difficult time fighting opponents that are in the air. And that's actually one of the main reasons for why I wanted this fight to take place in the first place, because if Zoro can overcome that weakness, then after this fight is over, and aside from his lack of direction, I don't see what other weakness he would have. I mean, he could get nerfed or caught off guard for sure, but aside from those two things and him getting lost, I just don't see what else could happen to him to make him struggle. Zoro then tries the strongest version of Tatsumaki against King, which is a twister that is strong enough to not only cut steel, but also cut Kaido as well. So he used this in the rooftop fight. Kaido was about to eat Luffy, and that's how, Luffy got saved by Zoro. Now what's interesting is that even though this attack was able to cut Kaido, it's not able to cut King. Now granted, Kaido doesn't really defend himself against attacks, he just kind of likes getting hit for some reason. Regardless though, it's still pretty impressive that King is somehow able to shield himself from any damage just by using his wings. After that, King swoops down and he says, "I'm gonna give you a sword fight, because why not?" And then a little bit later, King sends Zoro flying and crashing. And Zoro pretty much establishes that in order to defeat King, if he wants to beat King, he has to figure out what the deal is with his body, which is great because that means that before the fight ends, we're also going to get a lore drop. I do find it a little bit strange that as Zoro is clashing with King, he thinks about fishmen and giant's blood. Because if I were Zoro, the first race that would come to mind would be Skypians. But anyway, what I really like about this is that it makes sense for Zoro's opponent to be pretty durable because, Zoro is the swordsman of the crew, right? And his goal, or at least, part of what that goal entails, is that he should be able to cut what is said to be uncuttable. Whatever it is that people say can't be cut, that's the thing that Zoro should cut next. And so we know that King's race, the Lunarians, lived on top of the Red Line, and so we know that the Red Line is supposed to be indestructible, right? That's why Laboon has scars on the front of his face, because he keeps ramming himself into the Red Mountain, and he doesn't do any damage to it. So I'm wondering if King's race, if they maybe even built the Red Line, if they did something to build that Red Mountain, and maybe that's why it's so tough, and maybe that feature is also part of King's exterior or King's physical features. After King's attack, Zoro finds himself on the ground, and all of a sudden he hears And so, of course, we know that Odin loved the sound of Hiyori's shamisen, and I don't know if Hiyori was playing Moon Princess, but Odin did say that he loved that song and that she should play it at his funeral. And so because Zoro was on the ground, panting and unprepared, the sound of the unexpected shamisen triggers the sword to do what it does, which is to absorb tremendous amounts of haki from Zoro. The scene cuts to Orochi, he follows the sound of the instrument, and he finds Komurasaki/Hiyori playing it, and to me this scene feels, smells, and looks like a trap. I'm glad that we finally got confirmation as to who it was that healed the scabbards after their fight against Kaido, and so now I'm just kind of waiting for Denjiro to pop out of nowhere to do something to Orochi. Because Denjiro, he's been MIA for a while, we haven't seen him in a long time, so pretty sure him and Hiyori used that time to conduct a plan to take Orochi down. Because at one point she was having a conversation with Zoro, and she did tell him, "I wish I could be the one to kill Orochi." Now going back to King for a moment here, I made this connection, and maybe it's me looking too much into it, but I found it interesting that because of this chapter, technically speaking, if you look at King's powers, right, we have one power for each type of devil fruit there is. So his ability to produce fire would be a Logia type of ability. And then his ability to stretch himself like he's made out of rubber, as we see in this chapter, that's a Paramecia ability. But then he's also a prehistoric Zoan. So it's kind of like three devil fruits in one sort of a deal.
Alright, so with that said, now we can talk about One Piece Film Red. This is Oda's official announcement for the film, where he says that he's tired of drawing old, legendary men in movies. And so obviously he's referring to Shiki, Z, or Zeto, Tesoro, and Bullet. And so all of those characters that I just mentioned were the antagonists in the film that they were in. And so I'm guessing that this new girl that he wants to draw will also be the antagonist of Film Red. And so I'm guessing that her power will be connected to music, because we get a sheet of music in the teaser. Plus the narration says, will her voice cause eternal happiness or endless incarceration? Actually, no, it says endless imprisonment. Now the movie's obviously going to be connected to Shanks. We can see Shanks' scars on the D there. So is that supposed to be foreshadowing to Shanks being a D? Now to me, it's actually very difficult to think about things that Shanks could be doing in a movie that I'm assuming is over an hour long that doesn't end up spoiling some canon stuff or doesn't give us more insight into the canon lore of the world. So if it's about Shanks, I'm wondering if by the time we get to the movie, maybe something substantial about Shanks has already been spoiled or has already been revealed in the manga. Another point here is that Oda loves Luffy, right? He loves Luffy. Luffy is Oda's favorite character. We know that, okay? And so in every movie, Luffy has been featured. He's been the main character, right? And so I'm wondering, how is that going to work? Because Luffy and Shanks made a promise that they wouldn't meet up until Luffy became a great pirate, whatever that means, so that he can give Shanks the hat back. And so if Shanks is going to be part of this movie, it's like, so is this going to be like a flashback for Shanks? Are there going to be like parallel storylines? Like we go to the Straw Hats like, you know, for half the movie and then, you know, half like The Godfather Part 2, like just cutting in and out of these two storylines that are taking place in different parts of the world? Or will it be that by the time this movie comes out, Shanks and Luffy will have already reunited in the manga, and so therefore they can go on this adventure together? Because Oda did say in last year's Jump Festa that Shanks would be making his move. And so obviously I don't think that's happening this year, and so maybe those plans got transferred to 2022 after Wano ends. Now when I think about the word red, I don't just think about red-haired Shanks in the world of One Piece. I also think about the red line, right? I think about the road poneglyphs. I think about Lunarians, because we know that Lunarians lived at the top of the red line, and they were known as gods, because as you can see, she has wings on her back. And so does that mean she's a Lunarian? Does that mean that she's a Skypian? She also has the same hairdo, the same hair loops as Shirahoshi, and we know that Shirahoshi can actually use her voice to command the Sea Kings because she's Poseidon. And so I'm wondering if there's a connection between this girl and one of the ancient weapons. So I'm pretty interested in the concept of this movie already, mainly because of the timing and because it's connected to Shanks. Like those two things, the timing and Shanks, make me think that this film can have some canon-related material. But let me know your thoughts about it down below in the comment section. That's going to do it for me today, guys. Thanks a bunch for watching. We are lucky enough to have experienced both Chapter 1000 and Episode 1000 of One Piece within the same year. So with that said, have a great week, take care, catch you guys later, and